Hi, it's Pat Ford from the Coalition. We're standing outside of Chase Bank, and this is Smithfield, right?
Yep.
Yeah, Smithfield, Rhode Island. I happen to catch, and the T-shirt says it all, I happen to catch a 350.org protest, a local chapter of 350.org, protesting obviously climate change. Chase's fundamental rule is the financier of choice for pipelines and pre-environmental disasters everywhere. With me is old friend Aaron Regunberg. Of course, he was a state representative here in Rhode Island of note, ran for lieutenant governor, and now finds himself in law school. But he's taken the time to come back and stay connected to the Rhode Island community. You were involved in a seminal work study, if you will, working group of solitary confinement regulations here in Rhode Island. The last time that there was a heavy-duty attempt to essentially outlaw solitary confinement, you were sent off with the work that said, well, let's do a study commission. To you and your group's eternal credit, you actually did the study commission and reported back to the state with a provocative, well, facts. Isn't that inconvenient sometimes? Representative, how do you feel about the current legislation, and what, if you could say something to the voters of Rhode Island about the importance of eliminating solitary confinement, while at the same time noting that we are in violation of the United Nations Mandela rules, essentially leaving Rhode Island in the unenviable position of being literally an agent, a state of torture. What are your thoughts about what's going on right now?
Well, you're exactly right, Pat. Right now, our state government, in our name, using our tax dollars, is engaging in practices that, as you said, the United Nations agrees is torture. We are torturing our own neighbors, our own people, in our name, and I'm so grateful that again there is a real organized push and fight to say, you can have civilization or you can have long-term solitary confinement. You can't have both. One of the things that I find most frustrating in this conversation is when we hear from elected leaders, well, we're exploring this. We need to take a look at this because, as you mentioned, we have explored this. We have taken a look at this. In 2016, following an unsuccessful push for legislation to eliminate solitary confinement, I chaired a special legislative study commission on this issue and its practice in the Rhode Island ACI. And what we did was really, we made a real effort to try to bring folks together and see if there are administrative changes that we can make. Legislation didn't seem to be moving, and so the thought was, let's bring together experts, community members, people most impacted, and folks from the ACI, folks from the Corrections Officers Union, and see what we can do. And over the course of over half a year and a lot of study and a lot of work, we were able to come to a consensus, not on every issue, but on a number of significant reforms that would have significantly changed the use and made it less devastating for folks who are in prison right now. And the DOC agreed basically with a number of these reforms. But then, because there was no actual way of enforcement, they didn't actually do that. And so it's very clear we need legislation. We've studied this enough. We've seen how important this is. We've seen that systems that don't engage in this work a lot better. We tried it a non-legislative way. It made very clear that the DOC is not going to reform itself. We need to pass legislation regulating them.
Representative Regunberg, we were just talking about the totality of failure that this represents for a culture, for a state that hosts arguably one of the finest art schools on the planet, for a state that hosts multiple institutions of higher learning, some of them amongst the finest in the planet, for a state that was founded by a religious leader who was looking and seeking to avoid persecution from the state. How deeply, tragically ironic is it that Rhode Island persists in this type of behavior?
I think you put it very well. Pat. The damage that this practice does for folks, the stories that I heard when I was working on it and corresponding with folks on the inside that you hear now in the advocacy that's happening. I mean, it destroys people's minds.
Right.
And the fact is, we're disproportionately putting folks in long-term solitary confinement whose minds are already facing a lot of struggles. It's disproportionately folks with severe mental illness who are being put in and then kept in and kept in and kept in because there are behavioral issues. And as you also said, we're spending an incredible amount. The High Side, the facility that has the most long-term solitary confinement, that's something like $90,000 a year per inmate.
Right.
To think about the investments we could be making in that person's life, in housing, in employment, in education.
You could send them to Brown.
Right.
Almost, yeah.
But instead we're doing a practice that, by the way, is not good for anyone. One of the things that we really looked into in our study, corrections officers, it is a hard job. It is a job with some of the highest rates of suicide and divorce. Folks are in this stressful environment with so much coercive violence, and they're bringing that home with them. And in places like South Dakota and Colorado and Maine that have either completely done away with or severely curtailed long-term solitary confinement, have made their systems less structurally violent, so that the folks engaging in it are not being forced to do these oppressive practices. Corrections officers have better lives. They've got higher rates of satisfaction. They've got lower rates of suicide and some of the things that we've talked about. So there's no one that this benefits. There are some forces that say we need this. The state is saying we need this tool. But not only is it barbaric, not only is it causing incredible damage to our neighbors, it's also it's not good policy, and it's not getting us the alleged goals of our corrections system in any way, shape, or form.
Well, Aaron Regunberg, thanks again for taking some time. I know this was an important day. I always say to activists, everything you do in life is a political act, and some of them, like today, we'll never really understand the profound implications. But it's so important to see folks, everyday Rhode Islanders, taking literally world politics in their own hands. God bless. Let's stay in touch.
Thanks, man.
All right, buddy.